Divorced millionaire rejected all women until he saw a nurse make his MOM smile before he passed away. Room 312. His mother looked smaller than he remembered, frilier. Her eyes were closed, breathing shallow. The machines beeped like countdown timers, marking moments he couldn't buy back or control. Have you ever met someone who made your carefully constructed walls feel foolish instead of protective? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The richest man in Atlanta sat in his Bentley outside a hospice, watching a black woman sing to his dying mother through a window. For the first time in 3 years, his mother was smiling. Have you ever witnessed someone bring light into your darkest moment? Someone who didn't know your name, your worth, or your pain, but somehow made everything feel possible again. That's exactly what happened when Jameson Wolfe, a real estate mogul worth over $200 million, saw Nurse Brielle Johnson feeding his mother soup like she was family. But here's what nobody knew. This wasn't just about a son watching his mother find peace. This was about a man who'd sworn off women forever after losing $80 million in the most brutal divorce New York had ever seen. A man who'd built walls so high that even his own mother couldn't reach him. What started as gratitude would become obsession. What began as kindness would turn into scandal. And what looked like love, well, that would nearly destroy them both. Because when an anonymous email hit every major news outlet accusing Brielle of crimes she didn't commit, Jameson disappeared the same night. Coincidence? Let me take you back to where this all began, and you tell me. Jameson Wolfe stared at the hospice entrance like it was a courthouse, another place where people would take things from him. 3 years since his divorce made headlines. 3 years since he'd spoken to a woman outside of business meetings. 3 years of perfect cold control. His mother had maybe 2 weeks left. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, didn't negotiate, didn't care about his millions or his Manhattan penthouse sitting empty. It just consumed everything, the same way his ex-wife Victoria had consumed his trust, his assets, and his faith in human decency. The Vermont lake house had been his sanctuary. No neighbors for miles. No unexpected visitors. No women batting eyelashes at his black card or whispering about his net worth at charity galas. Just silence, spreadsheets, and the kind of peace that money could actually buy. But mothers don't die on schedules, even for men who controlled every other aspect of their lives. Mr. Wolfe? The receptionist's voice cut through his thoughts. Young, probably 20-something, with that eager smile he'd learned to recognize and avoid. Your mother is in room 312. She's been asking for you. He nodded without making eye contact, muscle memory from years of legal depositions where every glance was recorded, analyzed, used against him later. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and defeat. The same sterile hopelessness he'd felt signing divorce papers while photographers waited outside. Room 312. His mother looked smaller than he remembered, frilier. Her eyes were closed, breathing shallow. The machines beeped like countdown timers, marking moments he couldn't buy back or control. She had a good morning, someone said behind him. He turned. A black woman in scrubs stood in the doorway, holding a food tray. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Natural hair pulled back. No makeup trying to impress anyone. The kind of understated beauty that didn't demand attention, but somehow commanded it anyway. I'm Brielle, her daytime nurse. You must be the son she talks about. Jameson felt his jaw tighten. His mother talked about him? To strangers? He'd specifically requested minimal interaction, limited visiting hours, no unnecessary emotional attachments. Business only. I don't really do conversations, he said, the words colder than he intended. Brielle's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't retreat. Well, your mom does. Yesterday, she told me about the time you built her a treehouse when you were 12. Said you used your allowance money to buy real nails instead of the cheap ones your dad suggested. Something twisted in his chest. He hadn't thought about that treehouse in decades. Hadn't thought about the version of himself who believed building something beautiful could solve problems. She doesn't eat much anymore, Brielle continued, settling into the chair beside the bed. But she might try if you're here. Have you ever met someone who made your carefully constructed walls feel foolish instead of protective? Someone whose presence challenged everything you thought you knew about keeping people at a distance? Because watching Brielle gently wake his mother, seeing the way she smiled before even opening her eyes, Jameson realized his isolation hadn't protected him from pain. It had only protected him from healing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Jameson froze in the doorway. His mother's eyes were open, alert, focused on Brielle's face like she was watching salvation itself. In 3 weeks of daily visits, he'd never seen her this present, this engaged. Brielle's voice wasn't professionally trained, but it carried something deeper than technique. It carried belief, faith, the kind of soul-deep conviction that his Manhattan world had stripped away through contracts and courtrooms and bitter settlements. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. His mother's lips moved with the words. She knew this song. From childhood Sundays in small-town Georgia, before money complicated everything, before his father's construction business became an empire, before hymns got replaced by stock reports and silence. That was beautiful, baby, his mother whispered when the song ended, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Brielle smiled, spooning soup like she had all the time in the world. My grandmother used to say gospel music was medicine for whatever hurt you couldn't name. I think she was right. Your grandmother sounds wise, his mother said, accepting another spoonful. Tell me about her. Jameson watched this stranger unlock parts of his mother he'd forgotten existed. The woman who used to hum while cooking Sunday dinner, who sang him asleep during thunderstorms, who laughed at silly jokes and cried at commercials and believed in magic before cancer and his emotional distance wore her down. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8, Brielle said softly. Worked 3 jobs to keep our apartment in Atlanta. Never missed a school play or parent conference. She used to say, baby girl, you take care of people the way you want God to take care of you. Something dangerous stirred in Jameson's chest. Not attraction. He'd trained himself out of that weakness. But recognition. The way someone looks when they've survived loss and chosen kindness anyway. She sounds like she raised you right, his mother said, her eyes drifting to Jameson. Some people forget that taking care of others is the most important job there is. The accusation hit like a legal brief to the face. Direct, undeniable, devastating. Brielle followed his mother's gaze, and for the first time, really looked at him. Not the expensive suit or the Rolex or the perfectly controlled expression he wore like armor. She looked at him like she was seeing something he'd hidden even from himself. I should go, he said abruptly. I have calls to make. But as he walked toward the door, his mother's voice stopped him cold. Jameson, fragile but firm. She makes me remember who I used to be before I got sick, before I got tired. Don't you think that's worth staying for? Do you know what it feels like when someone sees through every defense you've built? When they recognize the person you used to be before life made you cruel? Because standing in that doorway, watching Brielle help his mother find pieces of herself that cancer couldn't touch, Jameson felt something he'd sworn he'd never feel again. Hope. And it absolutely terrified him. He came back the next day. And the day after that, always with excuses, checking on medical bills, reviewing insurance coverage, discussing treatment options with doctors. Never admitting he wanted to hear Brielle's voice fill the silence his emotional distance had created. You know, his mother said during his 4th consecutive visit, you could just say you like spending time here instead of pretending it's business. Jameson looked up from his phone, where he'd been staring at the same email for 10 minutes. I'm handling your care arrangements. His mother's eyes sparkled with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you actually smile when Brielle walks in. I don't smile. Baby, you've been wound tighter than a watch spring since your divorce. But yesterday when she brought you coffee without asking how you liked it, you smiled. First real smile I've seen in 3 years. Heat crawled up his neck. He had noticed that Brielle somehow knew he preferred his coffee black, strong, no sugar. Had noticed she brought it in a real mug instead of disposable cups. had noticed the way she moved through the room like she belonged everywhere, comfortable in her own skin in a way that made his expensive clothes feel like costumes. "Mrs. Wolf's right," Brielle said, entering with that perfect timing that was becoming dangerously familiar. "You do smile sometimes, usually when you think nobody's watching." Their eyes met across the room, and something electric passed between them. Not the calculated attraction he'd learned to recognize and avoid, but something honest, raw, the kind of connection that ignored net worth and focused on something more valuable. "I don't really do smiling anymore," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "That's a shame," Brielle said, checking his mother's vitals with practiced efficiency. "You have a nice smile. Makes you look less like a man plotting someone's financial destruction." His mother laughed, actually laughed, and the sound hit him like gospel music. When was the last time he'd made her laugh? When was the last time he tried? Brielle's studying for her RN degree at night, his mother said, clearly playing matchmaker from her deathbed. "Taking care of people and going to school. That takes strength. It takes stubbornness," Brielle corrected with a grin. Same thing, different attitude. Jameson found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. "How long have you been at this?" "Nursing? 5 years. School? 2 down, 2 to go. Someday I want to open a clinic in my neighborhood. Too many people can't afford basic health care, end up in emergency rooms for things that could have been prevented." Vision, purpose, the kind of dreams that actually mattered. He couldn't remember the last time someone had talked to him about anything other than money, power, or what they could get from him. "That's admirable," he said, and meant it. "That's expensive," she replied with a laugh that held just enough pain to make his chest tighten. Have you ever met someone whose dreams made your accomplishments feel hollow? Someone who made you remember what it felt like to want something bigger than yourself? Because sitting in that hospice room, listening to Brielle talk about healing people instead of using them, Jameson felt his carefully constructed isolation crack just enough to let dangerous feelings slip through. It happened on a Tuesday. His mother had been sleeping more, speaking less, existing in that space between here and gone that hospice workers recognized but never named. Jameson sat beside her bed, reading quarterly reports, pretending numbers could distract him from counting her breaths. Brielle entered quietly, moving with that practiced grace that made even medical procedures look like art. She checked monitors, adjusted pillows, whispered something in his mother's ear that made her smile without opening her eyes. "She's comfortable," Brielle said softly, settling into the chair across from him. "Peaceful. Is that medical terminology for dying?" The question came out harsher than he intended, sharp with 3 years of defensive armor and a lifetime of controlling uncontrollable things. Brielle didn't flinch. It's human terminology for letting go with dignity. There's a difference. Something in her tone made him look up from his reports. She was watching his mother with such tenderness, such genuine care for a woman she'd known 3 weeks. No ulterior motives. No inheritance expectations. Just compassion because his mother deserved it. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. "Take care of dying people. Deal with families like me who don't know how to handle emotions. You could work anywhere." Brielle was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently smoothing his mother's blanket. "Because everyone deserves to feel loved when they're scared. Everyone deserves dignity when they're vulnerable. And because..." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "Because taking care of people is the closest thing to prayer I know." The words hit him like a physical blow. Not because they were complicated, but because they were simple. True, everything his world of contracts and competition had forgotten. "My grandmother died in a place like this," Brielle continued. "I was 19, working 2 jobs, couldn't afford the fancy facilities. The staff was overworked, underpaid, treating patients like problems instead of people. I held her hand while she died, promising I'd do better for other people's grandmothers, other people's mothers." Jameson felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be present. Your mom knows you love her, but love isn't just a feeling. It's action. It's showing up. It's letting people see who you really are instead of hiding behind." She gestured at his expensive suit, his phone, his emotional barriers. Behind all this protection. Before he could respond, his mother stirred, opening eyes that seemed clearer than they'd been in days. "Jameson," she whispered, and he was beside her instantly. "I'm here, Mom. I need you to promise me something." Her voice was barely audible, but her grip on his hand was surprisingly strong. "Don't let what Victoria did make you forget how to love. Don't let fear make you waste the rest of your life." Tears he'd held back for 3 years burned his eyes. "Mom, promise me you'll let yourself be happy. Let yourself trust again. Let yourself." Her eyes drifted to Brielle, then back to him. "Let yourself be the man I raised you to be. The man he used to be, before lawyers and prenups and tabloid headlines. Before he learned that love was just another transaction that always ended in loss." Have you ever had someone ask you to promise something that felt impossible? Something that required becoming a person you weren't sure existed anymore? Because looking into his mother's dying eyes, then at Brielle's face filled with quiet understanding, Jameson realized he was about to make a promise that would either save him or destroy him completely. And for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't sure which outcome scared him more. "I promise, Mom." The words left his mouth before his brain could stop them, before his lawyers could review the terms, before his fear could build another wall. His mother squeezed his hand one last time, then closed her eyes with a peace he hadn't seen in months. She died 6 hours later, holding both their hands, humming along to Brielle's quiet gospel songs until her final breath. The funeral was small. A handful of family friends, some business associates who felt obligated to attend, and Brielle. She sat in the back row wearing a simple black dress, singing Amazing Grace, with a voice that filled the empty spaces his money couldn't touch. Afterward, while others offered hollow condolences and business cards disguised as sympathy, Jameson found himself standing beside Brielle in the cemetery parking lot. "She was proud of you," Brielle said quietly. "Talked about you constantly. Your success, your intelligence, your kindness before life made you hard. I wasn't kind to you. Barely spoke for the first week. You were protecting yourself. Grief makes people do that." She adjusted her purse strap, and he noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "I should get going. Long shift tomorrow." Something desperate rose in his chest. The funeral was over. His mother was gone. In a few minutes, Brielle would drive away, and he'd return to his empty lake house with nothing but silence and the promise he'd made to a dying woman. "Wait." The word came out rougher than intended. "I want to hire you." Brielle's eyebrows lifted. "Already have a job. Private nursing. For me. I have a house in Vermont, completely staffed medical wing. I travel frequently for business, need someone reliable for health management." It was a lie. He was perfectly healthy, hadn't been sick in years. But desperation made liars of honest men. "Mr. Wolf, I appreciate the offer, but the salary would be triple what you're making now, plus benefits, plus a donation to that clinic you want to open." Her eyes narrowed, and he realized he'd made a critical error. Offered money first instead of respect. Treated her like every other person who could be bought instead of the woman who'd sung his mother into eternity. "I'm not for sale," she said coldly. "Neither is my compassion. If you think throwing money at me will." "That's not what I meant." He ran his hand through his hair, destroying hours of perfect styling. I made a promise to my mother about not letting fear control my life, about being the man she raised me to be, and I can't do that alone." The honesty surprised them both. Raw, unfiltered, the kind of vulnerability his divorce had taught him to weaponize or hide, never simply offer. Brielle studied his face like she was reading medical charts, looking for symptoms of deception or manipulation. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften slightly. "What exactly are you asking for?" "Help. Guidance. Someone who remembers what it looks like to care about people instead of using them. Someone who can teach me how to be human again." The words hung between them like a diagnosis. Terminal isolation, chronic emotional numbness, acute fear of genuine connection. "The job offer is real," he continued quickly, "but it's not about nursing. It's about learning how to live again instead of just existing." Have you ever asked someone to save you from yourself? To help you become who you used to be before life broke you into pieces? because standing in that cemetery parking lot, Jameson realized he wasn't just offering Brielle a job. He was offering her the chance to resurrect a man who'd been dead for 3 years. The question was whether she believed he was worth saving. She said yes 3 days later, not because of the money, though the eviction notice tucked under her apartment door that morning definitely influenced her decision, but because something in his voice at the cemetery reminded her of her grandmother's favorite saying, "Sometimes God sends people who need fixing, and sometimes he sends people who need to remember they're already whole." The Vermont lake house took her breath away, not because of its size or luxury, but because of its loneliness. Massive windows overlooking pristine water, perfectly decorated rooms that felt like museum displays, expensive furniture arranged for maximum visual impact and minimum human comfort. "This is beautiful," she said, following him through rooms that echoed with their footsteps. "It's empty," he replied, and she heard the admission beneath the words. Her suite was larger than her entire Atlanta apartment. Private bathroom, sitting area, lake view that belonged on postcards. Everything designed to keep her comfortable and distant. "The kitchen is fully stocked," Jameson said, hovering in her doorway like a man unsure of his own home's geography. "Housekeeper comes twice a week. Groundskeeper handles outdoor maintenance. Internet password is on the desk. Professional, courteous, completely impersonal. What exactly do you need me to do?" she asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. He'd offered her a job without defining the actual work, thrown money at a problem without understanding what problem he was trying to solve. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I haven't been around people in 3 years. Haven't had a conversation that wasn't about business or legal matters. I eat meals alone, work 16-hour days, go to bed exhausted so I don't have to think about anything except numbers and contracts." He moved to the window, staring out at water that reflected nothing but sky and loneliness. "My mother was right. I've been existing, not living, and I don't remember how to be any different." Brielle set her bag on the designer chair, studying this man who owned everything and enjoyed nothing. Wealth without warmth, success without satisfaction, the kind of isolation money could buy, but couldn't cure. "Well," she said, surprising herself with her boldness, "we start with dinner. Actual dinner, sitting at a table, having a conversation that doesn't involve quarterly reports or medical updates. I usually eat in my office. Not tonight, you don't." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Relief? The faintest hint of the smile his mother had mentioned. "Are you always as bossy with your employers?" "I'm not your employee. I'm your..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Your recovery partner. And recovery means doing things that feel uncomfortable until they feel natural again." That evening, she found him in his office at 8 p.m., surrounded by paperwork and the blue glow of multiple computer screens. He'd changed from his funeral suit into jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, more approachable, dangerously attractive in a way that had nothing to do with his bank account. "Dinner," she announced from the doorway. "I ordered takeout. It's in the kitchen." "No." "Dining room. 2 plates. Actual conversation." "Brielle, I have work. We'll finish tomorrow. Your mother didn't hire me to watch you work yourself to death." The mention of his mother cut through his resistance like gospel music through silence. He saved his files, closed his laptop, followed her to a dining room that probably hadn't seen actual dining in years. She'd set the table with real plates, cloth napkins, candles that made everything warm and intimate. The takeout containers looked ridiculous among the elegant place settings, but somehow that made it perfect. "This feels strange," he said, sitting across from her. "Good strange or bad strange? Dangerous strange?" Their eyes met across candlelight, and something electric passed between them. Not the calculated attraction of his previous relationships, but something honest, primal. The kind of chemistry that ignored logic and focused on the way her laugh made his chest tighten, the way his rare smiles made her forget to breathe. Have you ever felt the exact moment when friendship crossed into something more complicated? When safety became risk, and risk became irresistible? Because sharing Chinese takeout by candlelight, watching Brielle make his empty house feel like home, Jameson realized he wasn't just learning to live again. He was learning to want again. And that was far more dangerous than loneliness had ever been. It started with small things. Brielle rearranging his office so he couldn't hide behind his desk during their mandatory dinner conversations. Jameson buying coffee beans from her favorite Atlanta roastery and learning to make them perfectly. Her leaving gospel music playlists on his phone, him actually listening to them. 2 weeks in, she found him on the dock at sunrise, coffee in hand, staring at water that mirrored the pink-gold sky. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him on the wooden planks. "Dreamed about my mother. First time since the funeral." He took a sip of coffee, and she noticed he'd made enough for 2 cups. She was singing. That him you sang at the hospice. Good dream or sad dream? Both. She looked healthy again. Happy. Told me she was proud of me for keeping my promise. Brielle accepted the second coffee cup, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Such a small touch, but it sent heat up her arm and made her hyper-aware of how close they were sitting, how the morning light caught the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "Are you keeping your promise?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching sunrise paint the water in impossible colors. "I'm trying. It's harder than I expected." 3 years of emotional numbness doesn't disappear overnight. What's the hardest part? Trusting that this isn't temporary, that you won't leave when you realize how damaged I actually am. The honesty hit her like cold water. Raw, vulnerable, nothing like the controlled businessman who'd hired her. Everyone's damaged, Jameson. Some people just hide it better. Not you. You're. He turned to look at her directly, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You're genuine, kind without agenda, beautiful without trying. Everything my ex-wife pretended to be." The word beautiful hung between them like a confession. Dangerous territory, professional lines blurring into something personal and complicated. "Your ex-wife hurt you badly. She destroyed me, publicly, took everything she could in the divorce, then sold stories to tabloids about my emotional unavailability and controlling behavior. Made me sound like a monster." Brielle shifted closer, close enough to feel his warmth, to smell his cologne mixed with lake air and vulnerability. "Were you controlling?" "Probably. When you have money, everyone wants something from you. Control becomes protection. Emotional distance becomes survival. And now," he set down his coffee cup, turning to face her fully. "Now I'm sitting on a dock at sunrise with a woman who makes me remember what it felt like to want something other than revenge or isolation. And I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of wanting you too much. Of needing you in ways that have nothing to do with nursing or recovery or the job I hired you for." The admission hung between them like morning mist over water. Delicate, dangerous. One wrong move and it would disappear forever. "Jameson, I know it's inappropriate. I know I'm your employer, and you're here to help me heal, not complicate your life with my emotional mess. But sitting here with you, watching you make my empty house feel like home, I can't pretend it's just professional anymore." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was exactly what she promised herself wouldn't happen. Getting involved with another employer, especially one whose emotional wounds ran this deep. She'd seen what happened to women who tried to save broken men. They usually got broken themselves. But looking into his eyes, seeing the man his mother had described beneath layers of protective ice, she felt her own walls crumbling. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if there's any chance you feel this too. This connection that has nothing to do with job descriptions and everything to do with the way you make me remember who I used to be. Have you ever stood at the edge of something that could either heal you or destroy you completely? When playing it safe felt like giving up on the possibility of something extraordinary. Because sitting on that dock with sunrise, painting the world gold around them, Brielle realized she was about to make a choice that would change everything. The only question was whether she was brave enough to jump. She kissed him, not the other way around. While he was still talking, still explaining why he shouldn't want her, still apologizing for crossing professional lines, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question disguised as an answer. But when he responded, When his hand came up to cup her face like she was something precious, it deepened into something that made the sunrise seem pale by comparison. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching, the space between them charged with electricity and possibility and the kind of risk that either saves you or ruins you completely. That was, he started. A mistake, she finished, fear making her defensive. Perfect and absolutely terrifying. She laughed, surprising herself. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? The kind that makes me want to do it again, even though my lawyers would have heart attacks and my therapist would probably need therapy. You have a therapist? 3 years of court-ordered anger management after I threw a chair during my divorce proceedings. Dr. Martinez will be fascinated by this development. The mention of his divorce should have been cold water on the moment, but instead it made her realize how far he'd come. From throwing furniture to sitting on docks talking about feelings. From emotional numbness to kissing his nurse like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. We should probably talk about this, she said, though talking was the last thing her body wanted to do. Probably. But first, he stood, offering his hand. Have breakfast with me. Real breakfast. Pancakes or eggs or whatever normal people eat when they're figuring out if they're about to make the best decision or the worst mistake of their lives. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet, hyper-aware of how perfectly her fingers fit between his. I make excellent pancakes. Of course you do. Is there anything you can't do? Choose men who are good for me, apparently. The words slipped out before she could stop them, carrying more truth than she'd intended to share. Her dating history with a wasteland of men who'd taken her kindness for weakness, her compassion for stupidity, her love for granted. Jameson stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression that was part hurt, part understanding. Is that what you think I am? Another mistake. She studied his face, looking for signs of the controlling behavior his ex-wife had described, the emotional unavailability he'd admitted to, the kind of wealthy arrogance that treated people like possessions. Instead, she saw vulnerability, fear, a man terrified of wanting something he might lose. I think you're a man who's been hurt badly, trying to figure out how to trust again. And I think I'm a woman who's terrible at protecting herself from men who need fixing. I don't want you to fix me, Brielle. I want. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like every other wealthy man who tried to buy affection. I want to be someone worthy of the way you see people. Someone who deserves the kindness you showed my mother. Someone who can make you as happy as you've made me in 3 weeks. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. No promises of expensive gifts or exotic vacations. No declarations of love after 2 weeks of proximity. Just a damaged man asking for the chance to prove he could heal without breaking her in the process. Pancakes first, she said finally. Then we figure out what this is and whether we're both crazy enough to try it. He smiled then, the real smile his mother had mentioned. The one that transformed his face from coldly handsome to devastatingly attractive. The one that made her forget why falling for your employer was always a disaster. Deal. But I'm warning you. My pancake standards are extremely high. Lucky for you, my grandmother's recipe has never failed to impress. Walking back to the house, hands still linked, morning light painting everything gold and possible, neither of them noticed the photographer with the telephoto lens hidden in the trees across the lake. Have you ever felt the exact moment when your life shifted from ordinary to extraordinary? When playing it safe stopped being an option? Because for Brielle, that moment was now. And she had no idea that someone was already documenting every second of it. The pancakes were perfect, light, fluffy, with just enough sweetness to make him close his eyes and make sounds that were almost inappropriate for breakfast. But what made the meal perfect wasn't the food. It was the way Brielle laughed when he groaned with pleasure, the way she stole bites from his plate, the way normal felt revolutionary after 3 years of eating alone. My grandmother would have loved you, she said, watching him finish his third helping. She always said the way to judge a man's character was to watch him eat food made with love. And what's the verdict? You eat like someone who's been starving. Not for food, for connection. For someone to care whether you enjoy what's put in front of you. The observation hit deeper than it should have. How long since anyone had cooked for him, cared whether he was satisfied, happy, nourished beyond mere nutrition? Tell me about her. Your grandmother. Brielle's face softened with memory. Sarah Mae Johnson, 5 feet tall, church every Sunday, could make a dollar stretch farther than anyone had a right to. Worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families in Buckhead, cleaned their mansions while raising me in a 1-bedroom apartment. She sounds incredible. She was. Never let me feel sorry for myself. Never let me use our circumstances as an excuse for anything. Baby girl, she'd say, poor is a condition, not a character flaw. You treat every person with respect regardless of their bank account, and you demand the same treatment in return. Jameson felt something twist in his chest. I wish I'd met her. She would have seen right through your expensive suits and cold behavior. Would have fed you cornbread and told you exactly what she thought about men who hide from life because love hurt them once. What would she think about this? Us. Brielle was quiet for a moment, absently tracing patterns on the wooden table. She'd be worried. She saw too many women in her work, housekeepers, nannies, nurses, who got involved with their wealthy employers and ended up hurt when reality hit. Different worlds, different expectations. And what do you think? I think. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. I think we're both adults who've been hurt before and are smart enough to be careful. I think you're nothing like the controlling, emotionally unavailable man your ex-wife described. And I think if we're going to try this, we need rules. Relief flooded through him. She wasn't running, wasn't letting fear make the decision for them. What kind of rules? Honesty. Complete honesty about what we want, what scares us, what we can and can't handle. No games, no manipulation, no using money or power to avoid difficult conversations. Agreed. What else? Independence. I keep my own apartment in Atlanta, maintain my own life, my own goals. I'm not here to be saved or supported or turned into some wealthy man's pet project. The word pet stung, but he understood. His money had always been a weapon or a wall. With her, it needed to be irrelevant. I don't want to change you, Brielle. I want to learn from you. Learn how to be human again instead of just successful. And I want to help you do that. But as an equal partner, not an employee you're sleeping with. The word sleeping hung between them, loaded with possibility and complication. They hadn't gotten there yet, but the chemistry was undeniable, building towards something that would change everything. So we're doing this? Officially? She smiled, and the sight made his chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to hope. We're doing this. Carefully, honestly, and with full knowledge that we're both probably crazy. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I can live with crazy. I can't live with wondering what if. Outside, morning had turned to afternoon, lake water reflecting clouds and possibility. Inside, 2 damaged people were building something that looked remarkably like hope. Have you ever made a choice that felt both exactly right and completely terrifying? When the safe option meant giving up on something that could be extraordinary. Because sitting in his kitchen, hands linked across pancake plates and honest conversation, they both knew they were about to find out if love could bridge the gap between 2 very different worlds. They just didn't know that someone was already working to tear that bridge down before they could finish building it. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Jameson's business phone, the one only his lawyer and accountant had access to. He almost ignored it, wrapped up in Brielle's warmth beside him, her head on his chest, breathing steady and peaceful. But 2 a.m. calls in his world meant crisis. Stock crashes, legal emergencies, the kind of problems that required immediate damage control. This better be life or death, Marcus, he answered, careful not to wake Brielle. It's worse. Check your email. Now. Something in his lawyer's voice made Jameson's blood run cold. He slipped out of bed, grabbing his laptop from the dresser, stepping into the hallway before opening it. The email had no subject line, just a link to a gossip website and a message. Interesting company you're keeping these days. Thought you should know what people are saying. The website loaded slowly, and when it did, Jameson felt his world collapse in real time. Photos of him and Brielle, kissing on the dock, holding hands, walking to the house. Her in his kitchen making breakfast, laughing at something he'd said. All taken with a telephoto lens from across the lake. All captioned with speculation and venom. Millionaire's mystery woman, who is Jameson Wolfe's live-in lover. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the second article, posted just hours after the first. Exclusive. Wolfe's new girlfriend linked to Florida hospice scandal. His hands shook as he scrolled through accusations that made his stomach turn. Stolen medication, patient abuse, financial fraud, all supposedly connected to Brielle's previous job in Florida, all documented with what looked like official paperwork and witness statements. "Sir, you still there?" Marcus's voice came through the phone he'd forgotten he was holding. "This is impossible. She would never. These accusations are completely fabricated. I know. I've already had my investigator start digging. The documents are sophisticated fakes. The witnesses have criminal records, and the timing is too convenient. Someone wants to destroy her credibility and, by extension, yours. Who would do this? Take your pick. Your ex-wife, who's still bitter about the settlement. Business rivals who want to damage your reputation. Anyone who benefits from seeing you isolated and miserable." Jameson stared at the photos again. Brielle, looking happy and relaxed in ways the camera had caught perfectly. The same expression that had been on his mother's face when Brielle sang to her. Pure. Genuine. Everything these accusations claim she wasn't. What do we do? Damage control. Public relations firm. Complete media blackout from both of you until we can prove these documents are fake. And Jameson, you need to prepare for the possibility that this gets much worse before it gets better. Through the hallway, he could hear Brielle stirring, probably wondering where he'd gone. In a few minutes, she'd wake up completely and find out that dating him had turned her into a national target. That her kindness to his mother, her decision to trust him, had made her a victim of his toxic world. "There's more," Marcus continued. 3 major news outlets want statements by morning. Your board is calling an emergency meeting, and someone leaked your address to the press. You'll have reporters at your gate within hours. Have you ever watched something beautiful get destroyed by forces you couldn't control? Ever seen someone you care about become collateral damage in a war they never signed up for? Because standing in his hallway at 2 a.m., reading lies about the woman who taught him to live again, Jameson realized his worst fears were coming true. He hadn't just fallen in love with Brielle. He'd painted a target on her back. And now the only way to protect her might be to walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to him. She found the articles herself. By the time he worked up the courage to wake her, she was sitting in the kitchen with her laptop open, reading accusations that would have destroyed a weaker person. But Brielle wasn't weak. She was furious. 5 years, she said without looking up when he entered. 5 years of perfect employment records, commendations from supervisors, thank you letters from families. And someone manufactures a scandal in less than 48 hours. Brielle, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. My world, my enemies. No. Her voice cut through his guilt like a blade. This is not your fault. This is what happens when people with money and power decide someone doesn't deserve happiness. She turned the laptop screen toward him, showing him details he'd missed in his first panicked reading. The accusations weren't just professional, they were personal. Claims about her financial desperation, suggestions that she'd targeted him specifically, implications that everything between them was calculated manipulation. They're painting me as a gold digger who preys on grieving wealthy men. A criminal who uses her nursing access to steal and abuse. Do you know what this does to someone in my profession? Even when it's proven false, the doubt follows you forever. Her calm was worse than screaming would have been. This was controlled rage, the kind that comes from watching your life get destroyed by strangers for entertainment. We'll fight this. My lawyer says the documents are fake. The witnesses are paid criminals. We can prove your innocence. Can we prove it fast enough? Before I lose my nursing license? Before every patient family Googles my name and finds these lies? Before the clinic I've been working toward becomes impossible because no one will trust me with their loved ones. The kitchen felt smaller with each word. Outside, he could hear cars pulling into his normally private driveway. Reporters, probably. Photographers ready to turn their pain into profit. "There's something else," she said quietly, closing the laptop. "I got a call 20 minutes ago. Anonymous tip to my nursing board about the Florida accusations. They're launching an immediate investigation. Until it's resolved, my license is suspended." The words hit him like physical blows. In one night, someone had systematically destroyed her career, her reputation, her future. All because she made the mistake of caring about his mother and falling for him. Who did this? Who has access to fake documents this sophisticated, witnesses willing to lie, connections to leak stories this quickly? Brielle was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made his chest tight. Someone who knows exactly how to hurt you. Someone who understands that taking away your money wouldn't be enough. They had to take away your hope. Through the window, camera flashes started popping like lightning. The media circus was officially beginning, and they were trapped in the center ring. "I should leave," she said suddenly. "Go back to Atlanta. Let you handle this without me complicating things." "No, absolutely not. Running makes us look guilty. Staying makes me look like exactly what they're claiming I am. The opportunistic woman who manipulated a grieving man." She stood, moving toward the hallway, and panic flooded his system. If she left now, if his toxic world succeeded in driving her away, he'd never forgive himself. Never recover from losing the woman who'd saved him from 3 years of emotional death. Have you ever been forced to choose between protecting someone you love and proving your love is real? When every option feels like betrayal. Because watching Brielle walk toward the door, knowing that staying put her career at risk, but leaving meant the lies won, Jameson realized this was the real test of everything they'd built. And he was terrified they were about to fail it. She didn't leave. Instead, she did something that surprised them both. She called a press conference. "If we're going to fight this," she said, straightening her shoulders like armor, "we fight it head on. No hiding, no lawyer speaking for us, no letting other people control the narrative." The media room at his attorney's office filled with reporters hungry for blood and scandal. Cameras lined the walls like firing squad rifles. But when Brielle walked to the podium in her simple blue dress, speaking with the same calm strength she'd used to comfort his dying mother, something shifted in the room. "My name is Brielle Johnson. I'm a certified nursing assistant from Atlanta, Georgia. 5 days ago, I was a private citizen caring for patients and pursuing my RN degree. Today, I'm apparently a criminal mastermind who somehow fabricated 5 years of spotless employment record while secretly abusing the elderly." Her voice carried across the silent room like gospel music, honest and unafraid. "The accusations against me are lies. Sophisticated lies, expensive lies, but lies nonetheless. Someone with significant resources and connections has decided that my relationship with Mr. Wolf threatens them enough to destroy an innocent person's life." She paused, looking directly into the cameras with eyes that held no guilt, no shame, only righteous anger. "I grew up poor in Atlanta, raised by my grandmother who worked 3 jobs to keep us housed and fed. I became a nurse because I believe everyone deserves dignity in their most vulnerable moments. I fell in love with Jameson Wolf because he's a good man who was drowning in grief until he remembered how to trust again." Jameson watched from the side of the room, amazed by her courage. No notes, no prepared statement, just truth delivered with the kind of conviction that made people believe. "The real crime here isn't what I'm accused of doing. It's what's being done to me right now. Character assassination, professional destruction, the systematic targeting of a working-class woman who dared to love someone above her supposed station." A reporter raised her hand. "Ms. Johnson, can you explain the Florida hospice documentation that shows?" "I can explain that I've never worked in Florida, never been employed by any hospice in that state, never had access to the medications I'm accused of stealing. The documents are forgeries, and any legitimate investigation will prove that within days." Another reporter, "What about allegations that you targeted Mr. Wolf specifically?" Brielle's laugh had no humor in it. "I targeted him? I was assigned to his mother's care by my supervisor. I had no idea who he was beyond the son who visits but doesn't talk. If I was looking for a wealthy Mark, I chose the most emotionally unavailable, isolated man I could find. Terrible strategy for a gold digger. That got a few chuckles from the press corps, and Jameson saw something happening. She was winning them over, not with legal arguments or public relations spin, but with simple, unvarnished truth. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for fairness. Let the investigation happen. Let the truth come out. And let the people responsible for this attack face consequences for trying to destroy an innocent woman's life. She stepped back from the podium, and the room erupted in questions. But she'd said what she came to say, and her dignity remained intact. Walking out together, past cameras and shouted questions, Jameson felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years of legal battles with his ex-wife. Hope. Real hope that truth might actually matter more than money and connections. Have you ever watched someone face their worst nightmare with grace and courage? When they chose to fight rather than run, even when the odds were impossible. Because watching Brielle take control of her own story, Jameson realized he wasn't just in love with her. He was in awe of her, and he was about to find out if courage was contagious. The break came from an unexpected source. Victoria's assistant, his ex-wife's former right hand, walked into Marcus's office 3 days after the press conference with a box of documents and a guilty conscience. "I kept copies of everything," Jennifer Chin said, her hands shaking as she opened files that would change everything. Phone records, email chains, payment receipts. Mrs. Wolf hired a private investigation firm to dig up dirt on any woman Jameson might get involved with. Jameson stared at phone logs showing calls between Victoria and the gossip website editor, wire transfers to the PI firm, email chains discussing neutralizing threats and protecting my investment. "She's been watching you," Jennifer continued. "Had someone monitoring your mother's hospice, your lake house, your business meetings. When Brielle moved in, Victoria panicked, started making calls, hiring people, manufacturing evidence. The Florida hospice documents were traced to a fired administrator who'd taken $50,000 to create false records. The witnesses were actors hired through a casting agency specializing in crisis actors. Even the timing of a nursing board complaint was coordinated to maximize damage. "Why are you coming forward now?" Marcus asked. Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I watched that woman's press conference, saw what we did to an innocent person, and because..." She pulled out her phone, playing a voicemail that made Jameson's blood run cold. Victoria's voice, sharp with venom. "I don't care if she's Mother Teresa. Destroy her. Make her unemployable. Make her untouchable. Make him watch everything he touches turn to poison." The hatred in his ex-wife's voice was bottomless. 3 years later, she was still trying to control his life, punish him for leaving, ensure he remained as miserable as she'd made him during their marriage. "She's not done," Jennifer warned. "There are more accusations coming, more fabricated evidence. She won't stop until Brielle is completely destroyed or until Jameson crawls back begging for forgiveness." But Victoria had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated both of them. Within hours, Marcus had filed criminal charges for defamation, fraud, and harassment. The evidence was overwhelming, the paper trail complete. Victoria's sophisticated attack had crumbled under simple documentation and one person's crisis of conscience. The nursing board dropped their investigation immediately. The gossip websites issued retractions. 3 major news outlets ran stories about the elaborate hoax and the wealthy woman who'd orchestrated it out of spite. But the real victory came when Brielle's phone started ringing. Not with threats or accusations, but with job offers. Families who'd seen her press conference and wanted someone with her integrity caring for their loved ones. Hospitals impressed by her grace under pressure. A medical school offering a full scholarship for her RN program. "People see through lies when someone has the courage to tell the truth," she said, reading through emails of support from across the country. Jameson pulled her close, amazed by her strength, her resilience, her ability to turn an attack into an opportunity. "I'm sorry my past tried to destroy your future. Your past didn't do this. A bitter, broken woman did this. And now everyone knows the difference." Have you ever seen someone's attempt to destroy you become the very thing that elevates you? When the worst attack becomes your greatest testimony. Because watching Brielle rise from the ashes of false accusations, Jameson realized that some people are unbreakable, and he was about to marry one of them. The proposal happened 6 months later, not in some expensive restaurant or exotic location, but in the same hospice room where they'd met. The space had been converted into a memorial garden, and Brielle had insisted on visiting during the anniversary of his mother's death. "You have loved seeing us here," Brielle said, placing fresh flowers on the memorial bench dedicated to his mother and 12 other patients who'd passed that year. "She would have loved seeing us survive Victoria's attack and come out stronger." The scandal had done something unexpected. It had forced them to face their relationship's weaknesses and build something unshakable. No more employer-employee dynamics. No more questions about motives or authenticity. They've been tested by fire and emerged as true partners. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, dropping to one knee beside the memorial bench. The ring wasn't the largest diamond money could buy. It was his grandmother's ring, the one his mother had worn for 30 years, the one that represented love built on trust rather than transaction. "Brielle Johnson, you taught me how to live again, how to trust again, how to love without fear or agenda. Will you marry me? Not because I can provide for you or protect you, but because we're stronger together than we ever were apart." She said yes through tears that had nothing to do with the ring's value and everything to do with the man offering it. A man who'd learned that real wealth wasn't in bank accounts, but in finding someone who saw your worth before you believed in it yourself. The wedding was small. Family, friends, medical colleagues, people who'd supported them through the scandal and celebrated their victory. Dr. Martinez, his therapist, officiated. The same man who'd watched Jameson transform from an angry, isolated shell into someone capable of healthy love. "I've seen many transformations in my practice," Dr. Martinez said during the ceremony, "but rarely have I witnessed two people heal each other so completely while remaining entirely themselves." Brielle wore her grandmother's pearls in a dress that cost less than his ex-wife's weekly manicure budget. She looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with designer labels and everything to do with marrying her best friend. During their first dance, she whispered in his ear, "Your mother was right, you know, about not letting fear waste your life. What made you so sure I was worth the risk? The way you looked at her while I was singing, like you were remembering how to hope. Anyone who could love their mother that deeply could learn to love again." The clinic opened a year later. The Viola Wolf Community Health Center, named for his mother, funded by his resources but managed by Brielle's vision. A place where healthcare was a right, not a privilege, where nurses like her could serve communities like the one that raised her. Standing at the ribbon cutting, watching Brielle address a crowd of patients, colleagues, and community leaders, Jameson marveled at the journey that had brought them here. Have you ever realized that the thing you thought would destroy you actually saved you? That your biggest fear was hiding your greatest blessing? Because looking at his wife, brilliant, compassionate, unbreakable, Jameson knew his mother's promise had been kept. He'd learned to love again, and this time, he'd chosen someone worthy of forever. 5 years later, Jameson stood in the nursery of their Atlanta home, holding their 3-month-old daughter while Brielle finished her shift at the clinic. Baby Viola had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's peaceful expression, especially when Brielle sang those same gospel hymns that had started everything. The walls were covered with thank you letters from families the clinic had helped, photos from medical school graduations Brielle had funded, certificates recognizing their community health programs. This wasn't just a room. It was a testament to what happened when love chose service over selfishness. "How was your day, beautiful girl?" Brielle asked, taking their daughter with practiced ease, settling into the rocking chair his mother would have adored. "Perfect, like every day since we stopped letting other people's opinions matter." The scandal seemed like ancient history now. Victoria had served 6 months for fraud and defamation, then disappeared into obscurity. The media attention had faded. What remained was the life they'd built deliberately, carefully, with complete honesty about their dreams and fears. The nursing school called. Brielle said, adjusting their daughter's blanket. They want to establish a scholarship program in your mother's name. Full funding for students from underserved communities. She would love that. Helping people help people. Through the window, Atlanta spread out below them. The city where Brielle had grown up believing love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Where Jameson had learned that money without meaning was just expensive emptiness. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd let fear win? She asked. Every day I'm grateful we chose courage instead. Baby Viola stirred, opening eyes that seemed to see everything. The love that had created her, the legacy that would shape her, the truth that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. What do we tell her about how we met? Brielle asked. About your mother, the scandal, the way love almost didn't win? Jameson kissed his wife's forehead, breathing in the scent of hospital soap and baby powder and the kind of happiness that couldn't be bought or stolen or destroyed by bitter people with expensive lawyers. We tell her the truth, that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as endings. That love requires courage more than money, and that her grandmother's last gift wasn't her inheritance. It was teaching us how to choose each other every day. Outside, the city hummed with stories still being written. Inside, 3 generations of love proved that some promises are worth keeping forever. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run from that recognition, or would you build something beautiful with it? Because that's what real love does. It doesn't rescue you from your life. It helps you become the person you were always meant to be. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about love that transforms instead of transactions. Tell me in the comments, what's one promise you made that changed your entire life? And remember, the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about broken people choosing to heal together.